right, here we are with another episode of Level Up Enablement. I am here with the most talented Ashton Williams.
Hi, so happy to be back.
Yeah, I greatly loved my little R&R. We went down to Santa Fe, New Mexico and ate too much, spent too much, and hiked not enough. So definitely really fun to get away and disconnect for a little bit. But
so important.
It was, yes. Most importantly today, though, we're going to talk about the Sales Enablement Lead. Let's get to it. So, Ashton, the lead, enablement lead position. This is something that you told me that you were looking at hiring a ton of in the recent days. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about, first of all, what is the enablement lead?
Yeah, so I think it's pretty important to really discuss like titles in general and at your company what that might mean. So for my company, a lead is you can be a team lead, you can be a project lead, you can be a technical specialist lead, and they're all leadership roles. Whereas at some companies, a team lead might not necessarily mean that people report into you or that you're full owner of a project, but that you have added responsibility above and beyond an individual contributor. For the purposes of this, my team are a collection of leads, and a lead means that they are an owner of a business unit. So I have my roles broken out by business unit that they own, and they're a lead because they own the success of that business unit end to end, which means onboarding, go to market, everboarding, meeting with managers, and making sure that everything that business unit needs to succeed is available. And when I say business unit, I mean my customer success team, sales team, partnership team, BDR. Those would all be considered business units because they have different metrics that one can be tied to.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that's a big clarifier. As we're going through a lot of these roles, just note that even though the title might sound very familiar to you, the functions within your own companies can be very different. A lead at my former company was, again, somebody that just owned a little bit extra, but didn't have anybody that reported into them. So very identical to what you had as well, Ashton.
Yeah, and I also would say that like the way that I've hired for leads, I've had at some other companies where this is a manager role, the things that I'm asking of them. So it really also depends on the size and scale, right? So the size of each of these teams is aligned with lead responsibility. You could be a manager at a company where it's much smaller and maybe your scope is wider and you're doing some of these same activities. But for this, my leads are really owning, building out what those teams need to be successful. And that's when we start to break into your company is big enough that you need customized enablement based on the job function in front of you. We're no longer having one sales onboarding for everyone. We have one that really touches on that mid-market's customer and that segment. We have one that really touches on enterprise in that segment. And we're really breaking that out, and the lead owns that personalization piece, is how I'm seeing it for my team.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think segmenting out those different areas within your own team definitely helps you set up more successful for those lead positions. And you have that dedicated connection to each one of those business units or segments as you're going through, which also helps more strategically to plan out and have alignment for the upcoming quarters too, because you're working directly with those leaders and stakeholders.
For sure. One of the things I was thinking about when I was creating these roles was how do we do the things that enablement does formally, which is break down silos, right? Increase ramp on both go-to-market and onboarding, and really support attainment. And silos are one of those things that we don't talk about as a measurable impact, but when there are silos in a company, enablement is the first to hit it, and their job is to go break that down to help the teams be successful. So intentionally, I have my team structured where each lead owns a business unit. And while they have to do a QBR back to those managers like they are the customer, we're all aligned here so that we can continue to break down the silos. So my person on the BDR enablement can talk to the sales enablement lead, and they can sort out how to bridge some of those gaps and frictions that may exist. Or, from our post-sales to pre-sales teams, I have two enablement there that are able to collaborate. And that's the hope.
Yeah, no, that's I love that. That's great. So let's talk about where that lead strategically fits into the entire role. I know we kind of touched on it a little bit, but how does that fit within the org structure? Where do you you as a new company or as an existing company should plug a lead in and win?
So the way that I've navigated it is my leads have some experience in enablement. That's like the marked difference between my specialists and my leads. And my leads are able to own something because they know what good looks like. And that can be someone you promote internally, right? Who just takes initiative building out an onboarding. Or that can be someone who's done it in their past life, whether they were a team lead, a manager, or actually did enablement lead. Where I see that in the organization is it's an in-between layer. So you're not yet at manager enablement. I don't have my leads handle that, but you are at direct manager support, where that partnership with the lead and the manager are super integral, because onboarding and ramping them on both go-to-market and starting new is particularly their focus, especially in a scaling company. So I see that as kind of a middle layer, right? They're not a director, they're not yet a manager, because they're not doing that manager enablement, but they are focused in owning that path for that team.
Yeah, no, that's great. I love that. We're going to skip down into the skills of the lead. What is that skill set that we're looking for, or the experience? I know we touched on this, like, were you a lead before? Are you a contributor that has helped out in various different ways before on this too? But what else are we looking for on that lead side of things?
For sure. So I always make the mistake of saying like experience, right? And I think I want to be clear here that like, it's not direct experience, and that's not actually even what I hire for, but I do hire for, have you done pieces of this job before? So I always say that you have 1 to 2 years of experience enabling a team, and that can be direct training and facilitation, that can be creating and curating training, that can be owning and managing a playbook, that can be running an onboarding, but you've done it enough that you've seen a couple cycles go through, and you've been able to see what was broken, what wasn't, or things you would fix, so that when you get here and I hand you onboarding or another project, you're able to just go. I would say that they have particularly great project management and prioritization skills. They're able to really prioritize the needs based on impact, so that they're past being reactive. They're able to kind of move that function to proactive and add structure. Typically, I look that they have some past experience in the field they're working in. I will always say that if you're supporting BDRs, you must have prospected before. You must understand the nuances between them. So that type of role empathy, but past empathy, expertise is what I'm looking for. You truly understand the approach is different, for example, on an inbound versus an outbound lead, or that how you talk to a mid-market customer or SMB is significantly different than an enterprise customer, and you feel the pains that a team might have doing that. I really think that's valuable. And at a lead level, I expect that you do know that, and that you know the math, the metrics, and the things that those managers care about. You should be able to easily speak to a manager about what are their goals, what's the trend we're seeing from a data perspective, and then working on how do I solve that. I would also say that they're able to design and develop learning solutions. So at this stage, I can hand you an LMS and you can learn it and you can build an engaging training. I can say that this is the problem on a team and this is the skill you need to come with, and you can build whatever needs to happen there without a ton of what should this look like. Not to say that we don't work on it, but I do expect that my team knows what good looks like in those places.
Yeah, this is definitely one of those roles where being an individual contributor is basically on steroids, where you are now providing a lot more of that. This is how we should do it. This is what I think that this should be. And don't have those hesitations or that manager approval. You should understand what the goals and the guidelines are that are already established within your own company. So this is more of that impactful. Not saying that other roles aren't impactful, but this is a very detailed, personalized impact job.
I would say that your scope is different, but your scale is not, if that makes sense. So you might not be handling, all of sales, but your impact across more people is happening within that business unit. I would also say that a lead for me is really project management lead is how I try to think about it, more so than a people manager. So my leads are not necessarily managing people here. They're managing projects that are high value to the company. So there's still a level of seniority needed. There's still, everyone's going to look at them as the example because they're leading training, and that's important, but they may not have direct reports. So they are still just really important influencers to the teams they support, in a different way than a specialist, who I think is really working at a more, not that it's not collaborative, but the more collaborative level with the team, as opposed to diagnosing the problem and deciding what's good for that team at a lead level.
And one important piece that I got while I was doing some coaching and individual like evaluations of myself was, you don't need to have direct reports to be a leader. That's like, own your projects, be the example of like, holy shit, this is what he's doing or she's doing. Own it and be the leader of your craft, your expertise, and really just drive your own success when you're a lead too. So own that. You don't need direct reports, but also learn how to collaborate to get the success of what is needed there as well.
For sure. I mean, ownership is probably the key theme across all these roles. Your ownership and accountability go up with each of these levels. And so, at a specialist role, I expect you to own the tasks and execute on them, right? And take full ownership of that. At a lead role, you're owning a project, which means you're owning a business outcome. You have to be able to speak to how you've impacted the business. And that's super important. And so if you don't have people and you have a project, I think people get caught up at leadership being people management. And I'm like, if I can't trust you to run a project, I'm certainly not going to give you a team.
Right.
Right. And everyone wants to skip this step. They're like, I'm an individual contributor, and so I'm ready for people. But realistically, even when you manage people, project management doesn't go away. So this is a place where I'd say project management and execution skills are just at a much higher caliber of expectation.
100%. Yeah. So we talked, I don't think we really need to go on how to enter or how to like basically get hired for this, because we kind of really detailed out what qualities we're needing for a lead position already. But let's talk about from the manager or director level, like what is it that we are looking for on the hiring perspective? What are the type of challenges that we can ask, or the type of qualities that we can look at to groom our specialist or internal, external hires as we're looking to fill those lead positions?
Yeah. So my philosophy as a hiring manager is I actually want to interview for the next role. And I mean that in the sense that I'm going to push this interview to see how you perform at the level I expect a manager to perform, so that I can identify how much you need to grow to get to that next step. Because my goal is to hire someone that, I hope to work for someday. I want their career to grow. So I do a couple things in my interviews for these roles. One, obviously we look at, can you tell the story of how your previous experience ties to the outcomes of this role, regardless of where it was? You being able to build that bridge for us with outcomes as to how, when you were maybe a manager of a whole team, what you did and you understood what it was that was enablement versus not, and can speak to that. So, my recruiters are screening for that. How does your previous experience really line up? And can you tell that story and articulate it clearly? In my interviews with them, I'm often looking for, are you a solution finder? Or are you a problem solver? And so I always like to hear people kind of take a problem they noticed and share how they solved it on their own, because that type of ownership is what I expect at a lead level. I always look for self-awareness. This person at this level should be aware of what they know and don't know. It's not, I don't know what I don't know here. Here it's, what, when I look at the job description, this is the 5 things I know I can do and I love. And these are the things that I'm super excited to learn. And I want to have that conversation, and I should be able to at that stage. And I think, the questions they ask me, someone at this stage should be able to ask you about your business, about the team they're working with, about the metrics, really trying to scope the challenge so that they accept that challenge. At that level, I'm looking for someone who's going to spend more time asking me questions than I'm going to spend asking them questions, because they understand what they need to know to diagnose if this is the right job for them.
Yeah.
I also have a presentation element. I really think that all enablers, we're so good at talking about it, right? You're so good at talking about it, and we get lit up about talking about it. And even, I'm in enablement. There's things I know are top tier that I should be doing. Definitely not doing all of them, because you don't have all that time. So I have an interview process where I strategically do a couple things. I have someone present a project that they've worked on. I want them to walk me through that project plan, how they executed, what was the business impact, or how they measured results. Or, in some companies, they're not as data minded. And so how would you measure results? And while the project is pretty straightforward, right? It sounds like just present something you've built. The people who stand out here are the people who understand how to curate this story for the audience in front of them, understand how to really make it feel like you are going to help my business be great, and curate that message, how they facilitate virtually, how they own that presentation and meeting. Do they come professional where I'd be comfortable having them present externally, for example. There's all these other little things that we're looking for that at that level, I'm not willing to coach on. You have to be able to facilitate, you have to be able to present, you have to be able to own a meeting, and your executive presence matters, because what I'm training you for is doing a QBR to our directors and managers. And I want to know how far away you are from that. With that being said, though, sometimes you accept someone who has less enablement experience and more experience in the field they're working with. But if they can show that ownership and executive presence and ability to really understand the problem, you can kind of teach the other stuff.
Yeah.
So I think as managers, you want to look for, what can you teach, right? What are you willing to coach on,
Right.
and what are you not? What stage of growth are you at? Do you actually have the capacity to teach someone that stuff? Like, there's tons of stuff I know how to teach, but I don't have time to. And is this person going to solve problems on their own so that your team can continue to grow? Because really, enablement is about scaling. Our job is to make things scalable and repeatable. And so it can't be someone who doesn't understand how to scale, or is not going to be someone who owns stuff so that you're constantly in there, right? I want to give them a business unit and help them succeed at doing that, not piggyback it together.
Right. No, yes, that's totally spot on. Especially, I love that you really hit on of like, is this person going to be self-sufficient? And then as we're all building out these JDs, like, we know what we're trying to ask for these positions, that we worked very heavily with HR or people ops to really define those. But I think you touched on something that I don't think a lot of hiring managers really look at. And that is, what am I willing to teach them? What am I not willing to teach them? And do I have time to teach them? Like, those are the three things that I think that should be on a hiring rubric of, are they teachable here? Are they not teachable here? What were they self-sufficient in these areas? And those are the things that you need to evaluate, because if you do not look at those, you literally are going to be putting yourself in a very difficult position where you're entrusting this lead position to really take over a lot of the strategy and, problems that are coming out of these business units that you don't need to have your hands on 100% of the time.
For sure.
But are they going to be able to do them without your help?
Well, and I also think about it this way, right? Enablement is a place where we all have to do a lot of self-learning and self-study, right? You have to make your own community. You have to find your mentors. At this level, that's why I say self-awareness is so key. I want someone to tell me, you know what, I'm really comfortable with building playbooks and that, but what I'm actually not that great at is facilitation. So I really want to take on this role and stretch myself by doing that. I understand that's a learning gap, but I've looked up a bunch of courses that I can take. And so I hope that doesn't take me out of the running for this job, because I'll do this in time. Right? I want to see someone who's proactive about their own development in this role, because eventually, right, as a lead, the next step is a manager, and you're going to be managing someone else. And so I need to know that you're there. Obviously, you're going to grow and develop in this role and learn a bunch of stuff, but you should come in very aware of how this is going to challenge you, what's going to change, what can you do outside of the company you're hiring for to improve yourself, right, and where does this fit into your long-term plans? Because I want to get into enablement is not a great enough statement when you're at a lead or manager level.
You got to know the field a little bit more before you jump into that. That is 100% for sure. I love it. Ashton, what other closing thoughts do we have on the lead position? Besides that, you are hiring.
Yeah.
Shameless plug for Ada, which if you haven't, go to Ashton's page. She has a huge announcement with Ada. So great time to join that team.
It has been a very, very exciting time at Ada. We are hiring for a business development lead. So it's a revenue enablement lead with a focus on business development. And then we're hiring for a revenue enablement lead with a focus on partnerships. We've just hired one for sales and for customer success. So our team is growing. Okay. And it's funny, some people will ask me how are you saying everything about your interview on this call, right? The person who finds this gold, right, and shows up at that interview and listens to all the things that I've just said and really owns it and takes that on, you're coachable, and I'm happy to work with you. It's not cheating, right? I put these things out there, which is why it's so much harder when someone shows up not ready with this. So I would just say, when you're going for a lead role, think about your next job, and ideally in enablement, the places that enablement gets a bad rap is we're seen as fluffy or we lack business acumen. And that's something I really want to change as a perception for us. So at a leadership level, a lead level, you need to be able to run a meeting effectively. A training has to end on time. You need to understand that when you talk to a CEO, you probably have 20 minutes of that 30-minute meeting. And at 5 minutes after that, If you're not saying something impactful, the meeting will end. And so how do you spin your story, tell the right story with the numbers, talk about business, and how you're going to impact that business effectively, or be aware that you need to learn more there, right? Those are both okay. But I would say that I'm always hiring for that next job. And that next job is being able to have executive presence and speak to leadership about the impact of enablement. And I want to see that in an interview.
I love that. That is so good. Yeah. If you're looking for a lead position, take this gold nugget here. Apply for Ada. Yeah, great. There are tons of other lead positions that are out there right now. Trust me, the enablement is blowing up. Tons of companies are getting on it right now.
Yeah.
I like it when everybody says that enablement's still very new. It is a little bit new, but it's also very, very growing. So this is the time to get in if you're looking at those enablement positions. Check out the rest of the series for those other entry level or, still impactful, but entry level enablement roles. But we've got a ton more to come. Next week, we are going to be evaluating the manager role. So as Ashton said, she's hiring for that next level. Let's talk about what she's actually hiring for in that sense. And then we're going to do an exclusive 2-part interview with a couple other extras on a roundtable. We're going to go over that director versus the VP. And then even on top of that, we're going to combine that with what does the future executive C-suite of enablement look like? I'm dubbing it the CREO. So if you're ready for that, let's go. And yeah, let's rock it to it. But yeah, only 2 more.
Did you just rhyme on purpose? Because I love it.
I didn't mean to, but it
Let's
just
go.
came out. Let's go. Only 2 more episodes left in this series. Totally excited, but we will come back with more. Ashton and I just love doing this with each other. So it's just a perfect weekly cadence for us as well. So if you have questions, drop them in the comments. Ashton, please share this and at least the links to your lead positions. Let's see what
I'll be sure to do that. And thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
Yeah, Ashton's TED Talk. Everyone, thanks for another episode of Matt Chats. We will catch you all next week where we talk about that manager again. Until then, stay fresh.